In this video, we're going to talk about repairing root-bound plants. So first of all, what is a root-bound plant? I'll show you right here. This is an example of a root-bound plant. This is a hydrangea paniculata, which has been in the pot just way too long. Okay, it was grown to sell at a garden center or to a landscaper or whatever, and it was probably timed to be in full flower when it was on the table. And then for whatever reason, it didn't sell. Maybe it didn't look perfect when it got to the garden center or whatever. Somebody didn't grab it, didn't take advantage of it. So then it sat there for a while. It kind of passed peak, and it just continued to stay in the pot for a while. And because of that, it went from probably rooted well enough to hold the soil together when it was taken out of the container and flowering, to just basically a solid root mass. Okay, you can take a plant, if you go to like a clearance area at one of the box stores or wherever, garden center, whatever, I can put my hand on top of the soil like this and flip this over and pull this off. Sometimes something is so root bound, the roots are coming out of these holes and it can be a little more difficult. But okay, so I take it out of there and I see that basically we've gone from soil, this thing having soil and some roots, to it just being virtually all roots. And I have an even worse example of this coming up. This one is not as bad as it gets, but it's on its way. It does have a couple things I would have checked for. These are live roots. I mean, I can see some new white root growth here. You see that? So I know the plant is not in as bad a shape as it may seem on the top, because it's still growing some roots. If I could pull at these and they just came apart, really, really easily, and they were just kind of gooey, I would assume this thing had some root rot and I wouldn't buy it. But this one, it's got some new roots on it, so I don't think it's as bad as it looks on the top right here. I don't think it's any problem. But what I do need to do is make sure that when this goes in the ground, that these roots that are wrapping a circle over and over and over and over again aren't going to continue to do that, especially in our clay soil here. So if I put this plant directly in the ground and it's already got this, the roots are going to take the path of least resistance typically, right? So, I mean, I would too if I was in the ground. So I'm looking for a place to go. I'm going to go into that spot where we've dug the fresh hole and put maybe some organic material in with it. And it's just going to kind of keep wrapping around. What I need to do is get these roots looking to change from one soil into my native soil. The soil that this plant is in, and maybe some amendments that we're using. I need to get these roots to penetrate into that soil. That's the only way this thing is going to become resilient on its own. If it stays in this, I've done landscape jobs in the past where a root bound plant was planted, this wasn't corrected, then the person watered, they had their turf irrigation water running on it, and it had no reason to root out into the surrounding soil. 5-6 years later, popped it out of the ground, it still looked like this. By some miracle, the plant was alive because that water kept hitting it enough that it kept this from being a problem. But you can see how much of a decline the top of this plant took, because it's almost impossible to water this enough, right? I mean, the water's just going to run right through it. First of all, it's hard to even wet this mass, and then there's no soil hardly left in there to hold it in place. I'm going to jump in and correct this. There is another technique that I'm not going to show in this video called root washing, where I could put this into, I could get a wheelbarrow over here, put some water in it, and actually wash this soil completely away and pull all of these roots outward so that they're all heading in an outward direction. I might do that on a tree. So if I had a very expensive Japanese maple and it was dormant, I wouldn't want to do this while it had leaves on it. And I could see that roots were maybe coming around the top and we're going to girdle the tree in the future or something. That may be a technique I would use on something like that. On this shrub, I think I can get away with just doing some basic correction on it and stop these roots. I'm basically just wanting to stop these roots from winding around. If it's minor, okay, I could just do this. I could take my hands and pull at it like this and just try to get these roots. You see how this is working? Now I've got these roots are now no longer wrapping, but they're coming out in this general direction, right? This is where we're trying to get it to root into that native soil as fast as possible, because we want it to be established and kind of off of our worry list as quick as possible. But this one, again, it's This one's past kind of that point. I'll take a pruning saw like this, and I just have it sitting on the pot right here. For me, the technique I've always used is I will take this bottom piece of section of root off of it. This one's not as bad as this gets. I got another one coming up that I'll show you that's worse. But I will frequently just take this bottom. Usually it comes off as a little pie, but it didn't in this particular case. But I'll saw that off just like that. And then now these roots that were heading around and wrapping around the bottom are now kind of free to come out and around. And then from the top to bottom, I'll cut this in about this much, about the thickness of that blade, in maybe 4 different places around here. And this is all I'll do on a plant like this. You're best to do this when this plant is dormant, not in the peak summer months. You might want to buy this as a clearance plant, hold it until it drops its leaves, goes dormant, and then, so now it may still appear that it's in a terrible shape, but those spots where I cut it right there are now, I've stopped the wrapping of the roots, and I've killed some portion of the roots too. So this one has already been pruned a little bit from after it flowered, but I can take a pair of head shears here and I can prune this back just a bit. And I'm basically putting this thing kind of back in balance with the amount of root damage that I did to it, right? I would not normally be doing this on a patio with all this. I'd probably be doing it wherever my hole was, and you know, I could use all this soil to go back in the hole with it when it goes. But again, that's all that really needs to be done with one of these shrubs like this. I can get more aggressive. Again, I can get a whole lot more aggressive in here and really tear at this thing. We could get, and I could, again, wash all of this soil off if I wanted to and make sure every root's heading out from it. That's a pretty tough operation overall, so I'd prefer not to do that. But that should be adequate. I know, again, may not look perfect, and it looks like abuse, but this is a necessary step to make sure these roots are going to head outward and stop wrapping around. What you'll notice a lot of times is some of the most root-bound plants are deciduous plants. Boy, they come out in the spring, like this Physocarpus or that Hydrangea paniculata that I just showed you. They'll come out and bloom early in the season potentially, or come out with beautiful foliage, whatever it has going on with it. This could be spireas and weigela and all these. And then they get busy rooting in these containers. And so as a nurseryman, when we're growing these deciduous plants, we got to get rid of them in the spring. When they look peak in this container, it's best for the customer to get them home, get them in the ground, because it doesn't take long to go from, you know, looking good on the top to being thin, you know, just like that hydrangea was, and looking a little bit rough, ending up on a clearance table somewhere and have roots like this. Look at this, how actually root bound this thing actually is. So this is an extreme case. You know, again, though, I want to check this. I want to pick this plant up, pull that container off of it, and make sure these, despite how bad this looks, these are in good shape. Weirdly, they're in good shape. They're not rotted. They're not tearing apart easily. And so I know it doesn't have root rot. It doesn't have some sort of phytophthora. It doesn't have a disease. It's just coming with an issue that I can pretty easily correct pretty quickly. Again, I'm going to reduce the top of it a little bit to adjust for this. Typically, I'd want to do this when the plant's dormant, but sometimes, you know, life happens and you got to get on something. But again, I'm going to saw this. This one will come off a little bit easier. But this is the technique I like to. Something would have been better than that container to support it. But for demonstration purposes, I think you can see what I'm talking about here. Okay, but there's that. Look at that. It's like a solid, it's just solid roots basically. Isn't that amazing? how much, and again, it's a lot of times these deciduous plants are the ones that are that aggressive in the containers like this. Okay, and then again, I'm just gonna cut this from top to bottom. And see that with this root, you know, these roots are just going this way, and we're gonna need them. You know, obviously I'm killing some portion of them by cutting them, but I am now gonna allow it to head outward and not inward any longer. It's about as deep as I want to cut it. Again, it's about the thickness of this blade. This technique has worked well for me for 40 years. This cutting top to bottom technique, just to stop that circling, but leave enough mass that I can also hold the plant upright in the ground. If I was to root wash this and just really pull at this and get all of this apart, it would probably end up with a mass of roots, something like this. And then the top of this thing, think about how heavy this thing is. First wind it becomes, you know, I'd be worried about it leaning over. So I do like the weight of this, you know, being down below it. And with these slits in it, roots should start going in this direction. If you look around the top on something like this, if you see that you have a lot of roots, you know, wrapping around the actual stem up here, you know, that's the kind of thing that can be problematic. In fact, Steph, if you'll follow me right here. This Japanese maple right here, I noticed this right here. You see that root right there? That is a root where this plant had an issue where roots were wrapping a bit in there, and this wasn't corrected. I think this is where it's more important on trees probably than anything else, but you can see the future here, right? This root continues to wrap around that one. That could definitely be problematic. So that's, you know, look around the top and make sure you don't see any of this kind of stuff. You may go ahead and get them while they're small in that container rather than wait for them to be this big in the ground. One other question I get quite a bit is, you know, I planted something and it's 2 years later and it's not growing, nothing has changed. Maybe the plant's even gotten a little bit smaller in time. Sometimes it might be, you know, you hired somebody to plant something and maybe they planted it just like that thing just came out of the container, and it'll sit there and do that and it won't actually get itself established in the ground. I'm always going to assume something went wrong in the planting of it. So it could be that the plant is extremely root bound like that and needs to be popped out of the ground, a little surgery done to it. Could be that it was planted too deep. All kinds of things that it could be. But when I hear that somebody says something, you know, something's been in the ground for a long period of time and it's just struggling, it's still struggling for some reason, obviously you get planted in the wrong place too. Full sun where it needed shade, or shade where it needed sun, whatever. But a lot of times it's this kind of thing. It's poor planting techniques that were originally used. Root bound plant, planted too deep, over mulched up on the stems, all kinds of things that you can go and check for later. Now, if you're watching this video and you're panicked because 6 months ago you put a bunch of plants in the ground that had roots just like this and didn't do anything about it, is it worth digging them up? I would just ask yourself, is the plant struggling in some way? Does it seem to be that it's not recovering easily, you know, after you've watered it or whatever? Then maybe that is a plant that you need to pop. They'll come out of the ground easily. If it's only been less than a year, won't be hard to pop something like this out of the ground. Again, I always want to put the plants back in balance, even if I'm sacrificing a few flowers from the next year. The damage that I'm doing to these roots, I don't want to ask this plant to have to support anything up here on top. So if you're out buying clearance plants, pop the thing out of the pot, assume it's going to be root bound. If it sat on the shelf for a long time, it's probably going to be root bound like that. It's repairable as long as the roots are still strong. You know, they're not rotted. I don't want to buy anything that has weird rotted roots on it. I don't want to introduce that into my own garden. I want to leave that plant behind. I'm assuming that plant has died from a disease related to overwatering in some way. But if the roots are still, you know, you can pull them and they don't break easily, I'd bring it home, do a little surgery on it, cut it back a bit, pop it in the ground. Again, probably best when it's dormant. So I could probably, I'm filming this in August, late August. Yeah, late August. So probably October, would have been more ideal for this, or anytime through the winter. I could just held it back, but I just kind of wanted to demonstrate this because there's a lot of clearance plants available in the fall. I'm not scared of a plant like this, but I do, again, I need to do some surgery on it. If you're buying little small 4-packs, 6-packs, or little annuals or perennials, those are almost likely, they're very likely going to have some roots wrapping around, as long as it's not severe. I usually don't do a whole lot with that, but you can pull them apart just a bit. So tomato plants, pepper plants, zinnias, whatever you're buying that way. There's some plants that are almost always going to come to you root bound. There's almost 100% chance that any ornamental grass you buy is going to have a lot of roots in the container. They're just good at rooting in. So this Calamagrostis, or reed grass, is a clearance plant. It's got a lot of dead material in it, so that's probably why they probably got underwatered at some point, and so they moved it to the clearance area. I grabbed it because there's absolutely nothing wrong with it there, but it's always going to have wrapping roots like this. So I'll do the exact same surgery on this that I did. You see that on the bottom? That's going to be very, very typical of a grass. There's other plants as well, like agapanthus. 100% chance your agapanthus is going to appear extremely, extremely root bound. This I'll do the same kind of surgery on. Some of those perennials that just kind of come root bound, you know, like agapanthus, I'll just pull them apart just a bit. They have really, really thick roots on them. It just almost immediately fills the container up. It actually helps them to bloom when they're a little bit root bound. Some plants are helped by that to get them to flower. So agapanthus in full bloom at a garden center, almost 100% chance that that thing's pretty root bound. You can just enjoy the flowers on it, and then when it's done, you can get in there and do a little bit of surgery on it before you put them into the ground. So there's some thoughts on root bound plants. I don't mind buying root bound plants, but I will do some surgery on them. Just make sure the roots aren't rotted. That's the main thing about checking roots. I'm not going to panic that the thing's full of roots. I'll just, you know, do whatever kind of sawing surgery I need to do, prune a little bit of the top off of it, most things, and I'll sacrifice some flowers too. You're buying a butterfly bush, it's extremely root bound, it's in full bloom, take the flowers off of it. It'll be back in flower in 5 weeks probably, and the plant will be better off for having the surgery you're going to end up doing on the roots. Maybe with a tree or more valuable plant, you know, that you're spending a lot of money on. If you're seeing it like this, you might want to, you know, look up a video on root washing and wash it completely off and get the roots heading out and about. But again, that's something you want to do during dormancy. You know, you don't want to take your Japanese maple and wash the soil off of it in June. That's not, I don't think you're going to get a very positive outcome from that. So that's more timing related. Hopefully that video would talk you through that. So there's some ideas. Again, root-bound plants don't scare me at all, but you do need to work on them. If you leave them like that, especially in our clay-based soils that a lot of us have here in the southeast United States, that plant's really going to struggle to move from one soil type to another. If the roots are wrapping like this, it's going to delay it for some period of time, and potentially those roots are strangling one another. So they're going to kill one another, you know, over time as well, if they're not heading outward instead of inward like that. So thanks for following along.